Good afternoon, everyone. We are right at 1 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. We have an exciting batch of lightning talks of about 10 minutes each. This is our first round of these. The second round will be, I believe it's on Thursday or Friday. I'd have to look at the schedule, but we have that coming up as well. So all of our talks today are focused somewhat on Wikidata. A couple of housekeeping logistics. If you have questions throughout, please feel free to post them in the Q&A or in the chat. We are going to do questions at the end once everybody has had a chance to present. Let me get my introductions. Okay, so we are going to start with Wikidata as an open and central hub in the linked data web. This is coming to us from Bayan, who works at Wikimedia Deutschland as a partner relationship manager, where they help institutions using Wikidata and Wikibase. Then we'll move on to a presentation entitled Wikibase What? That is being presented by Patricia Lampron, Ayla Stein-Kenfield, who is the repository services librarian and associate professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And Myung-Ja is also on that talk as well. And they are metadata librarian at the University of Illinois as well. And then finally, two more. Alicia Fabervang will present on opening up our data. They are a developer at Wikimedia in Sweden. They work with linked open data and support cultural heritage institutions. And then finally, we'll close with a presentation from Jeff Mixter and Gina Solares entitled Bringing IIIF Manifest to Life in Wikidata. So we will start with Bayan. Bayan, you want to go ahead and take over?
Thank you very much, and hello, everyone. All right, I will see if I can share my screen. All right, can everybody see my screen? Great, thank you for this introduction, and welcome everyone to this brief talk that I will be giving about Wikidata. I thought to start off by telling you a little bit about us. Wikimedia Deutschland is a non-profit organization that works to provide more people with more access to more knowledge. We are the German chapter of the global Wikimedia movement and are based in Berlin. And we have a dedicated software development department where we work on delivering innovative and open source software solutions. So what is Wikidata? Wikidata is a free and open source knowledge base that contains general purpose data about the world. It is part of the Wikimedia projects and it contains structured data. Now, one of the great things about Wikidata is that it is linked to other databases, and this is the focus of our talk today. It is also multilingual and collaborative. The data that it stores is released under a public domain license, and the data is based on statements and references and can be edited both by humans and machines. Wikidata was a project that was launched in 2012 in Wikimedia Deutschland, and the goal of Wikidata is to provide access to more information. Currently, there's more than 29 million data items and over 25,000 active editors across the world. Wikidata aims to first provide support to Wikimedia projects such as Wikipedia, for example, but also it provides support to a variety of different projects outside of Wikimedia, such as visual art browsers, question answering websites, or personal digital assistants, and even more. And last but not least, Wikidata aims to provide access to other external data sources by acting as a hub for linked open data. And this is what we will be delving into today. So as of now, there's more than 6,000 catalogs, databases, social networking sites, and more connected in Wikidata. And Wikidata has thereby become the biggest identifier hub in the web today. So what do those external identifiers look like in practice? Here we have a Wikidata item on the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights. And you can think of a Wikidata article as the equivalent of a Wikipedia article, but instead of having long string text, here it is replaced by structured data. Now, one of the great things of Wikidata is that it allows for the integration of external identifiers. And what those external identifiers do is that they provide links that points us and redirect us to data that is residing in external data sources outside of Wikidata. So if we take a closer look here, we can learn more about the European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights, because we have a variety of external identifiers that link to different sources, such as the virtual international authority file, and also different authority files of different libraries, such as the French National Library, the German National Library, and the Library of Congress. Right now, there's more than 6,000 external identifiers in Wikidata. Some of them are probably well known for the library community, such as the VIAF and the Library of Congress control number that we saw just now, just to name a few examples. So you might be asking yourself, what does this mean for libraries? Libraries are increasingly seeing the value in contributing to Wikidata by linking their data collections through identifiers. And this helps libraries in broadening their reach. It helps them increase the discoverability and the visibility of their collection as well. Wikidata provides libraries with a platform to connect to the world of linked open data. And because this platform is a freely available and hosted platform, this means that libraries and GLAM institutions don't need to worry about creating and maintaining their own linked open data infrastructure. So library professionals can leverage Wikidata to connect concepts in different databases to each other. They can use it for finding additional information on a topic based on its ID number, and even to extract relevant information from Wikidata to be imported into their databases. Of the many emerging potential uses for Wikidata, one area of focus has been using it as a central hub for institutional identifiers. There are several libraries that have linked their identifiers to Wikidata, such as the German National Library and the Library of Congress. And this was done in an effort to open up their collection and increase the access of their knowledge. Here we have a good example that illustrates the power of linked open data. The National Library of Wales have created linked open data for their data collection on Welsh national landscape prints. And this was done thanks to a Wikidata visiting scholar called Simon Cobb. And once their data was uploaded into Wikidata, they were able to use the Sparkle query service to, one, visualize their data, and second, analyze it in ways that were not possible before. So they were able to run query services to ask questions such as, what is the most depicted subject in their collection? They could ask questions to trace the birthplaces of artists in the collection. And they could even create visual diagrams that allow them to kind of trace the development of print trade in Wales. Another interesting example that shows how Wikidata external identifiers can be used is Cora. Quora is a question answering website, and they have an internal ontology that allows them to ask users questions about, let's say, taxes, for example, if they have previously indicated that they're willing to answer questions about plants. However, this ontology, it had some issues and it needed to be improved. So what they did is they aligned their ontology to Wikidata, and they were able to fix the mistakes and fix the bugs and add missing relations between their concepts in their collection. Another example showing the endless ways that Wikidata external identifiers can be used is entity explosion. Entity explosion is a browser extension. It was created by one of our community members called Toby Hudson. And what it does is that as you are browsing the web, it allows you to have access to additional information. So, for example, say you are on the Twitter account of the European Commission. What this browser extension would do is it would ask Wikidata what are the other sources that it knows about that also cover this topic, and then it would display them in like a little pop-up on the right side. So this is a great way to quickly learn about the European Commission with a quick lens, and you can jump from their Twitter account to the page that the German National Library has on them, or the Finnish National Library has on them, for example. And this is a great way that shows how Wikidata can be used to create connections between different places on the web and make access to information easier. Thank you all. This was my brief talk about Wikidata. I hope it gave you a glimpse on how it can be used for libraries, and I shall do my best to answer any questions at the end of the session.
Great, thank you so much, Ryan. Appreciate it. Up next is going to be Myung-Ja to talk about Wikibase what?
Hi, give me 1 second to.
Oh, Ayla's here. Okay.
Yes. Oh, yes, it's Ayla. Sorry.
Okay.
So I just share screen. Yes. Okay. You can see my screen? Excellent. Okay, so my name is Ayla Stein-Kenfield, and I am the Repository Services Librarian at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Thank you for attending this session today. And I am presenting on behalf of another colleague who had an unexpected family emergency. So the impetus for us to, oh shoot, sorry about that. The impetus for us to try Wikibase is an ongoing project to migrate our institutional repository ideals off of DSpace and onto a node of our homegrown repository system. So one of the major complaints of our current IR is the lack of authority control. Ultimately, our goal is to connect all of our repository services, the IR, the digital library, the Illinois Data Bank, whatever our future archival management system ends up being, and our researcher information system, Illinois experts, to the name authority system. So therefore, we needed a system that would give us good control over names in different services. We also considered using an authority control system for other types of metadata, but decided to focus on name authorities for now because names are complicated enough. So we decided to try out Wikibase because it can create linked data, and can link to out to Wikidata. It and Wikidata have both been growing in popularity for creating and managing linked data and implementing authority control in other library, archive, and museum institutions. It has the ability to push metadata into and out of our repositories, potentially in batch. There's an active development community, and the software is open source, so it wouldn't have cost us anything extra to set up. So going into this, we thought, perhaps naively, that installing, setting up, and using an instance of Wikibase would be straightforward. Specifically, we assumed that either properties from Wikidata or a default set of properties would be present upon install. Quick statements would work out of the box, and that documentation for setting up and using our instance of Wikibase would be easy to find and easy to understand. Needless to say, our assumptions were incorrect. So our first challenge was understanding what we were working with. That is, understanding the purposes of Wikipedia, Wikidata, and Wikibase, the differences between them, and how they all work together. Wikipedia is the online encyclopedia that we all know and love. I'm not going to define Wikidata because of the last lovely presentation. But Wikibase is software that allows data to be stored and retrieved in a structured way. And Wikidata is a specific instance of the Wikibase software. So our next challenges were finding documentation and setting up our instance of Wikibase, which has a number of, of its own child challenges. So it presumes familiarity with Wikimedia interfaces, which makes a certain amount of sense. There was not a default, let me try that sentence again. Wikidata properties or a default set of properties were not included. The official documentation for the Wikibase GitHub, and it was specifically actually for quick statements, and I don't know if that is a separate GitHub or not. Our developer was dealing with this. But the difficulty we had with quick statements is we couldn't get it to install because the official documentation was out of date, and we didn't realize that until our developer emailed, the Wikibase development community, and they were like, oh yeah, it's actually this other GitHub repository over here. So we did actually end up getting it to work. We were not really sure how to find guiding documentation for how to start using our Wikibase instance, because most of the documentation we found wasn't about Wikibase, it was about Wikidata, which is fine, but isn't super useful for setting up and your own kind of instance of Wikibase. And then there was other knowledge prerequisite knowledge that we didn't realize, / there was a learning curve. So, of course, as soon as we pretty much figured everything out, we found out about the Learning Wikibase website, which we're not affiliated with. So, but it seems to be pretty useful and is exactly what we would have needed when we started 9 months ago. As for what we're going to do from here, we have decided that we will not go live with the authority system. Let me try that sentence again. When we go live with the institutional repository, our new institutional repository interface, it will not directly include the authority system, but we are continuing to work on the authority system, setting that up with the intent that as we continue to work out bugs and update the repository, our our new repository software that we will connect Wikibase to that software. So, and I will be here for questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very helpful presentation. There have been a couple comments in the chat that people are looking at installing Wikibase, and this has been a helpful introduction to that. Our next presentation will be opening up our data, Wikidata for authority control. Alicia, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Here it is. Lovely. Thank you. My name is Alicia Fagerving. I am a developer at Wikimedia Sverige, which is the Swedish chapter of the Wikimedia Foundation. A great representation of Wikimedia chapters here today, I can see. And I'm here today to give you a short introduction to a project that we have recently started working on called Usable Authorities for Data-Driven Cultural Heritage Research. This is...
Excuse me, Alicia.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. There are a few comments in chat about the volume being low. Is it possible that the mic volume can be raised just a little bit?
Let's... What about now?
Looks like that's better. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Is it good now?
Yes. Now we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me know. So yeah, I'm here to introduce you to the project called Usable Authorities for Data-Driven Cultural Heritage Research, which we recently started working on together with two quite important museums here in Sweden. The goal of this project is to investigate whether vocabularies as linked data stimulate new data-driven research on museum collections, and whether Wikidata in the first place is a good, suitable platform for linking different authority files and vocabularies. This is a project that we expect to take until 2023. So as I said, we have just started examining the data that we're going to work with and taking some first steps. The museums involved in this project are the Nationalmuseum, the National Art Gallery of Sweden, and Statens historiska museer, Swedish National Historical Museums of Archaeology and History. And our role in this is to provide support and know-how about Wikidata, and to work directly with a couple persons from these museums. What are we doing in this project? First of all, the museums have selected a subset of their authority files. They have focused on people in their collections who are active about between 1500 and the 19th century. And the reason for this selection is, on the one hand, if you go further back in history, then it all gets a bit messy. You get a lot of people like some medieval goldsmiths that are not easy to create good authority files for, because we don't really know a lot about them. And on the other hand, if you work with authority data of people closer to our era, or even artists who are alive today, then you can get into data protection issues. So by focusing on the subset, we get a nice sample of data. One of the goals of this project is to demonstrate and visualize different sorts of connections that exist in the museum collections, such as connections between the people who are represented there, the objects that they have created, and all other sort of data that already is up on Wikidata. Because as we know, one of the great strengths of Wikidata is that the sum is more than just the parts. And a very important part is to have contact with other cultural heritage institutions in Sweden and do active outreach about Wikidata and linked open data and the tools that we are using, with the hope that more and more museums and libraries and other cultural heritage institutions open their eyes to Wikidata and also start examining how to work with Wikidata and the other Wikimedia projects. The reason why we are doing this is, as the previous speakers have mentioned, Wikidata is an important part of the modern linked open data landscape. It is the big identifier hub with several thousand identifiers, links to external resources, many of them from the cultural heritage sector. And when cultural heritage institutions actually work with Wikidata directly and develop their own expertise rather than relying on help, for example, from local Wikimedia chapters, then they become more powerful users of the Wikimedia projects. They become more aware of the challenges and benefits and the workflows involved, and they get knowledge that can be shared with other institutions. So that's why the way we are doing this project is that the project team from the two museums work with their data mostly on their own. We have focused on using OpenRefine as a tool to clean up data, to match it to Wikidata, and to both add identifiers from Wikidata into the museum's catalogs, and also do it the other way around, to add identifiers from the two museums to Wikidata. And from my experience, even if OpenRefine can look a bit scary at the beginning, the project team started working with it very fast, even for some internal tasks like cleaning up their data, finding duplicate entries, finding entries that are misspelled, correcting them. And they have said that it's even better than some of the tools they have used previously for this sort of work. And we have also put a lot of emphasis on the training in Sparkle, the query language that is used on Wikidata to retrieve information from it. Also focusing on developing those in-house skills at the two museums. And even though we are at the beginning of the project, there has already been some great progress. For example, a new property has been created on Wikidata, an identifier for the National Historical Museums. And the project team imported on their own over 2,000 of these identifiers to items that are already on Wikidata. And then they were able to, as you can see, here is one of the items that was edited. As you can see, the Wikidata identifiers were then pulled back to the museum's database to make the authority file more usable and more connected to the rest of the web. Thank you so much. I'm available for your questions at the end of the session.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Our final presentation, our final lightning talk today before we go into questions, so be thinking of questions, will be Jeff and Gina on bringing IIIF manifest to life in Wikidata.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Again, my name is Jeff Mixter. I'll be joined with Gina Solares to talk about a little project we worked on about embedding a IIIF viewer into Wikidata to help bring to life images associated with resources described in Wikidata. So just a little bit of background. On November 12th, 2018, Wikidata created a new property, P6108, that was called IIIF Manifest Wikidata Link, or excuse me, IIIF Manifest Link, which is basically a way to create a statement or a claim between an item described in Wikidata and its IIIF resource. And those of you who are not familiar with IIIF, it's a standard for describing not only digital items, but how they're packaged together. And it's an evolving standard that's been adopted by many GLAM organizations. So as of July 20th, today, there are approximately 175,000 Wikidata items that use that P6108 link to a IIIF manifest. But the property is just a URL. So if you're looking at the Wikidata item, it's just this really long, kind of weird looking URL that if you click on it, just presents you with a bunch of JSON LD data. So it is both neither very user-friendly and not very actionable within Wikidata as it is today. But Wikidata as a platform, or MediaWiki as a platform, supports plugins and extensions that can add additional functionality to the UI. And one of those ways to create a plugin or an extension is to create a custom JavaScript piece of code that you can then deploy on your own sort of logged in user account for Wikidata or MediaWiki in general. That sort of enables this new UI functionality. So just at a quick glance, these are the top 10 organizations that have links that have this IIIF resource link. You can see it's pretty long tail with the National Gallery of Art having a large majority of the current links. But I've been monitoring these links over time, and the numbers are increasing. So it looks like it is the property is gaining steam in terms of its representation across Wikidata. So here's one example. This is a description in Wikidata of the oil painting The Farm by Miro. And it has all of the sort of quintessential statements or Wikidata statements you'd expect. What is it an instance of? When was it created? Where is the painting located? And if you were to scroll down, you'd also then see this IIIF manifest link that again has that kind of odd looking URL that if you click on it, it just brings you up to a bunch of JSON, which would probably terrify you and cause you to close that screen immediately. So it's just, again, it's useful information if you have a component that knows how to do something with it. So my colleague and I, Bruce Washburn, created a custom JavaScript extension that can be applied to Wikidata. So if you log into your user account and then click on Preferences, and then go to the Appearance tab of those preferences, and then click on the Custom JavaScript link, that will take you to a wiki text page that you can then just copy and paste this line of code into it. And what this basically does is every time you load a MediaWiki page, in addition to all the sort of MediaWiki JavaScript, it's also going to invoke this piece of JavaScript that is the one that goes off. It takes the data that's being delivered to the browser, looks for that IIIF manifest link, and if it finds it, it loads a Mirador IIIF viewer into your Wikidata UI, and then uses that IIIF manifest to populate the viewer with whatever the image happens to be. So now, if you were to reload this page, having enabled that extension, you now see the oil painting image of the farm in the Wikidata UI, and it has all the features and benefits that come along with IIIF, like deep zooming and panning and things like that. So we felt that it was a nice way to sort of bring data that's being encoded in Wikidata to life in Wikidata itself. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gina to talk about some of the work that they're doing with it.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Can everybody hear me? Great, thanks for the nods. So hey everyone, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I used the Wikidata Mirador 3 extension, and then a little bit about what I learned along the way. So I work at Gleason Library at the University of San Francisco. I'm relatively new to Wikidata. I started editing last year, honestly, because of some of the great LD4 2020 conference presentations, and also because of the Program for Cooperative Cataloging's Wikidata pilot. So at my library, we use Content DM for our digital collections, and it has built-in support for the IIIF presentation and image APIs. IIIF, of course, as Jeff described, is both a community and set of open API specifications that support interoperable functionality for our digital repositories. So in March, Jeff and Bruce Washburn of OCLC announced this extension for Wikidata in the LD4 Slack workspace. So I saw it there and I thought it sounded like an interesting and fun way to learn more about IIIF and Wikidata. So I started looking around for a test set of metadata to try it out. Next slide, please. So first I went to Wikidata to see what kinds of items were using that P6108, the IIIF manifest property that Jeff mentioned earlier. So that's the list on the left. These are the top 12 values from the statistics by class query on the property talk page on Wikidata. That is, these are the top types of items and how many of them that are using that property. Then I went to my library's digital collections to see what might be good candidates for this project. So the list on the right shows images of a few prints by the California artist Millette Dean, a works progress administration artist who contributed panels to Coit Tower here in San Francisco and who worked as a federal art project printmaker in the 1930s. Next slide, please. And once I had selected the test set of images, I harvested the content DM metadata using OpenRefine, added that IIIF manifest URL, reconciled the data to Wikidata, and then mapped the fields to the Wikidata properties using OpenRefine schema editor. And from that, then I was able to generate a text file that I could drop into Quick Statements, which is a Wikidata tool for batch editing. Next slide, please. And once the Wikidata items were created, including that P6108, it was simple to see an image in the Mirador viewer when I looked at any of the individual Wikidata items. So these were great illustrations that I could use when talking to my colleagues about Wikidata, about linked data, and about IIIF. Of course, it's one thing to talk about other people's projects, but it's quite another to use examples from the collection that's most familiar to your colleagues. Next slide, please. And even though this was a small set of data, this project helped me to look at collections metadata in new ways. For example, what's missing from our metadata, right? Despite the built-in content DM support for IIIF APIs, we weren't showing the manifest URLs in our content DM metadata. So it was a learning experience to construct those URLs and get them added to the data. Thankfully, OCLC provides a content DM customization cookbook recipe for inserting that IIIF manifest link as metadata within content DM. But using Wikidata for this project meant that I could also use new tools to visualize relationships in the metadata. For example, the image on the right is an entity graph view of a single Wikidata item, which makes it very easy to see at a glance that this item is connected to specific people, places, organizations, and events. Similarly, using IIIF in conjunction with Wikidata helped me see other connections. The embedded Mirador 3 viewer makes it easy to click through to the full Mirador viewer, which allowed me to do cool things like, next slide, please, add other libraries' IIIF-enabled images and create side-by-side views from different repositories. So on the left side of this slide, you'll see Richardson's Bay, a 1938 print by Millette Dean from my library's collection. And on the right is a 1932 postcard negative by photographer Zan Stark, showing a similar view from the collections of the Marin County Free Library. Next slide, please. So when Jeff and I were thinking about what to share in this lightning talk, I was struck by how this project mirrored this year's LD4 conference theme, building connections together. Like much of our linked data work, it would not have been possible without the existence and efforts of many overlapping communities and standards. Wikidata and IIIF are both open community efforts. That is, we can participate, use, and shape the metadata and the direction of both. The LD4 Wikidata Affinity Group and the PCC Wikidata Pilot are active learning communities that support library workers as they engage with Wikidata and linked data. And of course, I couldn't have done this work without OCLC's adoption of the IIIF standard within Content DM and the user script that Jeff and Bruce created. So if you're a part of any of those efforts, I thank you. And if you're new to linked data projects, be bold and be reassured that we're in this together. Next slide. And thanks, and we look forward to your questions.
Thanks, everyone, for some wonderful presentations. So we have time now for questions. We've got about 15 minutes for questions on any of our presentations. I'm actually going to turn it over to my colleague, Esther. I think we already have at least one in the Q&A.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you to all of the presenters for those really wonderful talks. I learned a lot. And I have a couple of questions of my own, but I'll start with one that has already come in. So this is in regards to the last presentation. It starts with a comment. So IIIF can, as you say, add annotation to paintings that could be in different languages. This would be a perfect match with Wikipedia with all languages and have pictures in a wiki article that is an IIIF manifest with annotations. And the question is for Jeff, have you heard of any plans like that in Wikipedia?
I have not, no. I know there are a lot of groups that are both in IIIF as well as in the sort of the wiki communities that are sort of evaluating how to incorporate multilingual support, not only in the description of IIIF resources, but how it then relates to other sort of connections within sort of the web of data.
Thank you. Magnus, did you want to say anything else about that question? Oh, IIIF, I apologize. Thank you. All right. Well, I have a question for Alicia. When you were editing in OpenRefine and reconciling with Wikidata, were you using the native like Wikidata functionality in OpenRefine, or did you take a different approach to it? And I guess this question could be for others as well. Just kind of curious.
Yeah, we did the native OpenRefine reconciliation tool. And it worked pretty well because many of the people whose works are represented in the major museums already have very often Wikipedia articles and much more often Wikidata items. So we ended up with a rather small number of items that have to be created from scratch. But yeah, many of them have quite unique names, as long as you don't go too long back in history.
That's excellent. It's great that the ecosystem has so much information in it now that this is like such a useful approach. Okay, so another question here from Anonymous. Has anyone added IIIF manifest links for images of things other than artworks? For example, images of a building or other entity that might have a Wikidata item.
I'm not sure. Maybe Gina could answer since she did that. She had that query that looked at sort of the instance of tags applied to things that had that property.
Yeah, it's a great question. We've, of course, done it for books as well, because we have some digitized books in our digital collections. And I'll just share that link to that Wikipedia, the Wikidata query in the chat and make sure I share it with everyone. So that will take you to that query that I talked about. And on there, you'll see a prototype aircraft, a drug jar, written works, a bust, a codex. So there might be other things on there that would be of other types, and it could be interesting to explore.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the chat and pulling up Slack to see if there's any questions that have landed over there. So far, no. Bayan, I'll use.
I'll ask a
oh, yeah, I was
Wikibase
gonna
question
say.
if someone is willing to answer about Wikibase. At my local institution, we're looking at doing a local Wikibase instance, and I'm wondering, particularly at Illinois, what the major use case was for using Wikibase as opposed to just adding natively to Wikidata itself.
That's a good question. I don't have a definite answer for you other than probably we didn't want to. Okay, let me back up. So the main use case was for as a name authority system, right? For our institutional repository. It's never had an authority system before. We also we're a really large institutional repository, so we have hundreds of thousands of names. And so one of the worries is pushing out, like creating identifiers or entities or whatever for different people who actually end up being the same person and we just didn't catch it or whatever. So we want to have like a certain amount of local control first before we put it out to everywhere else. And then also because Wikidata and Wikibase are so new to everyone on the team, that's probably that would be another reason why we didn't want to just put it out to Wikidata.
We also at OCLC Research had deployed Wikibase independently for a couple of projects, and in our use cases were very similar. We wanted to sort of define our own data model, not necessarily use the properties and sort of classes, if you will, that are in Wikidata. And we also, especially in our early prototypes, we're really trying to understand how to manage authorities in there. And within the library community, obviously authorities have specific strings associated with them. That was their primary entry point in, sort of pre-linked data. So we wanted to make sure that we could have close control over this string representation that was either the label or the sort of alias label for the entities that we were creating.
Bayan, I saw that your hand was up. Did you have an answer for this as well? And then Alicia, I see your hand.
Yes, I think this, Jeff has already mentioned it, that like one of the reasons that attracts so many users is indeed the flexible data model. And for example, if you're working with Wikidata, you're also dependent on a community that helps with uploading and editing the data. And with Wikibase, you are and you're independent of that, and you have more freedom.
Thank you. Alicia?
I think when discussing this division between Wikidata and Wikibase and which one we should select, something that I've heard when talking to museums is the issue of notability and the issue of how useful the data actually is for the community. Because if a museum has like, if an archaeological museum has like 1,000 pieces of flint that are all cataloged and each has their own ID number, should that really go up on Wikidata? What value does it provide to the community?
Would you personally have any philosophical reasons why you would put data into Wikidata, even if there really only seemed to be a local application initially? Or do you sort of see that point of view?
Yeah, I do understand it. I think it has to be judged from case to case, but something that is happening on Wikidata right now is a discussion about scholarly articles, because millions of items about scholarly articles have been created on Wikidata, and some people are complaining that it's hard to write good queries, that it slows down everything, because well, with 75 million items on Wikidata, which is growing every day, there are technical limitations. So there has been talk about just taking this data set of scholarly articles and doing something with it. It's still unclear what, but yeah, maybe having a separate project for them or something like that. So this is something that the Wikidata community is aware of, that it needs to be discussed and decisions have to be made.
Thank you. Yeah, the allocation of resources is such a crucial thing. And there's, only so much computational power and all of these questions. I'm just going to read a couple of comments from chat very quickly. There's a comment here that the notoriety point is really important when adding to Wikidata. And another comment about agreeing with not putting in a zillion individual items. Also that this person believes that there are advantages for compatibility with having Wikibases and possibly shared hosted with our own stuff and then putting other stuff in Wikidata. And there's an agreement that that's a +1, that's a very good point.
Yes, so if I can add, the Ayla's point too about our use cases completely on board. So we would like to be responsible for our data first, and we would like to have some control over our data first. And then since we already have all those names in our local system, we would like to see what kind of additional the descriptive properties that we need to describe those each individual names managed by locally. So we'd like to have some place that we can control them and make sure that everything is working and everything is well described and so on. And then, as you know, there is a stream from Wikibase to Wikidata. So when we are ready, we are happy to explore that option to publish those data to Wikidata.
Thank you. Elizabeth, I think we are just about at time. Should we try for one more question?
Yeah, if anybody has a parting thought or question, we can certainly entertain that. I'll just kind of talk as I wait to see if anybody has that. And if not, I will thank all of our panelists. I have learned a lot, and I plan to go back and watch a bunch of these as we are undertaking some similar projects, as I mentioned, in my institution. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Esther, for helping to moderate this session. Again, this session will be on YouTube shortly if you want to watch it again or share with colleagues. I'd also encourage everybody, the next session that we have in LD4 today is going to be our poster session. Be sure to go to Sketch. It's not on YouTube. It's not on Zoom. It's going to be on the wonder.me platform. So please do hop over there at 2:15 for the poster session. And other than that, I hope you all have a good afternoon and evening and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks, everyone.